Alright, what's going on everyone on YouTube? NES Roller, welcome to a brand new review. And if you guys could tell, my camera quality probably looks a lot better than what it has. I just invested in a new Nikon D3300 DSLR, got a few lenses and things like that, so I was using just a Nikon quick pick that was pretty good. You know, it did what it did its job, but I had to invest in a new camera for school. I was shooting pictures and doing stuff like that, so I needed to get a new camera. So I got a really good deal on this Nikon body and two lenses. Paid $400. You know, it was a really good deal. So I felt like I should probably invest, not only to make my videos better, but to make my schoolwork better and things like that. So hope you guys notice the difference. If you guys do, please let me know. So back again with another documentary. I've really been enjoying watching these documentaries. I've reviewed a bunch now here on the channel, and I've just kept on loving them. That's why I keep on wanting to review them, because I just really enjoy them. And I have another one coming pretty soon, another review. And this time I'm going to be talking about a film that was sent to me by MVD. And it is called Salad Days, a decade of punk in Washington, D.C. from 1980 to 1990. I found this documentary really interesting. I think that the punk movement that was going on in Washington, D.C. is pretty reminiscent to us horror fans, that we love horror films, we love to talk about horror films, we like to watch horror films, we like to dissect horror films. And people look at us weird because we love to watch horror films all the time, and some of us look weird, which is cool. You know, I look fucking weird, and things like that. So to have a group of people like me and my friends, you know, I found it really interesting. So basically, punk movement, Washington D.C., 1980 to 1990, probably one of the most important movements in music history, in my opinion. So basically we have all these wealthy white kids, high schoolers, who are brought up in families that are well off in Washington, D.C., have a lot of money, you know, you typically work for the government and things like that. And they just felt out of their skins, and they didn't feel like they fit in with society. So they, you know, listened to the Ramones and bands like that were going on in the UK, and they started to migrate to downtown Washington, D.C., and they started to look weird. They dressed weird, you know, they had mohawks and things like that. And they started this punk movement, which is just bands playing fast music. You know, typically people who were in these bands were not musicians, but they didn't care about that. It was about the music, it was about the sound they were making, it was about the lyrics that they were writing. And I found that really interesting, that these high schoolers who feel like they don't fit in with society are taking out their emotions and their feelings in this music. And you could totally see that on stage through archival footage that they show, that they really are into this music, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. And I found that really interesting to us horror fans, because, you know, we talk and we sound ridiculous sometimes about the arguments that we get into about our favorite franchises and things like that. But just like, you know, the punk people in the punk movement, they really don't care about that. They just care about expressing themselves. And I found that really inspirational and things like that, that a group of people who don't fit in society could express themselves like that. So the band pretty much starts at the beginning, the documentary pretty much starts at the beginning in 1980 with bands like Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Government Issue, and then it moves forward through the things like the straight edge movement, which I always thought were just no drugs, no alcohol, and things like that. But as the documentary explains, a lot of these venues in Washington, D.C. were age restricted, and most of these people who were in these bands who went to these shows were high schoolers, and they wanted to play in these venues, but they couldn't because of the age restriction. So they came up with putting two black X's on their hands and that would allow them to play all-age shows in these venues that relied on alcohol sales to carry them to stay open. So they created the straight edge movement, and all these high schoolers were showing up to these shows, and the movement started to grow more and more and more. And then it started to become too mainstream in the mid-'80s. And the people who were enjoying this punk movement and this punk music originally from the 1980s started to see a change, and they really, really didn't like it. It wasn't really about the music anymore. It was about the culture, about, stage diving and acting crazy and all that kind of stuff. And these people who were originally in these bands started to notice that this is not what it's supposed to be. So a movement called the Revolution Summer happened in 1985, mid-1980s, and bands like Scream, which Dave Grohl got his start in, that's how he joined Nirvana, was formed. And it was, this summer basically went back to the roots of the punk music. It didn't revolve around the culture as much as the music. New bands were starting to be formed. Bands that were already known in past were starting to play again, and they were starting to distribute their records. I found that really, really interesting. Just like us horror fans online, we make our films, we distribute them ourselves online through other fans and things like that. And the punk movement was very, very reminiscent of that. They would make their own record labels, they would get their records printed, and then they would make their own artwork, and they would ship them out themselves. And I think that's really, really reminiscent of what's going on right now in the horror community with all these amazing, amazing indie filmmakers who are making their films and distributing themselves. And I think it's really, really reminiscent of what was going on here. So Revolution Summer rejuvenated the punk movement. A lot of people who were into that credited that summer as bringing the punk music back to what it was supposed to mean, the music and not the culture. So as the documentary starts to wrap up, you get to the 90s where punk really, really explodes mainstream. It's not what it used to be, unfortunately, and all the people that were in these bands are starting to dwindle away from playing anymore, and they started doing other things like distributing other punk bands' records and things like that. So I found it a really, really interesting period of time in U.S. history and music history in general. I think if there's an important movement of music, it's the punk movement, and how it made a huge impact on the youth that was going on at the time, of all these wealthy white kids that didn't fit in. And I found it really, really interesting because I'm one of those kids who really don't fit in. And really, really interesting documentary. If you guys get a chance to pick it up, I think it's a really, really fascinating story, and it has some really, really great archival footage, a whole bunch of interviews with all these different bands, all these people who were in these bands, and I found it, because of that, it was a lot more effective. And it was one of the better documentaries I've watched. It's not the best one that I've reviewed here on the channel, but I think that it holds its own ground, and it has a really, really interesting message to say. So if you guys get a chance to pick up Salad Days, released by MVD on September 18th, do yourself a favor, pick it up. I think you guys would really, really enjoy it if you like punk music and just a really, really interesting story in general. So that should be it. That's Salad Days, a decade of punk in Washington, D.C. in 1980 to 1990. So thank you again, everybody, for watching. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/NESRuler22. I hope you guys have enjoyed the upgraded quality, hopefully. I know I'm now shooting in 1080p, so I hope you guys enjoy that. I have another documentary review coming up, so please stay tuned to that. And thank you again, everybody, for watching. See you guys.